Okay, so now today we are going to hear from Mark Hancock, a very experienced teacher on pronunciation. So thanks very much. And now, Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much, Amy. And I'd like to just begin by giving you an outline of what we're going to do today. And I'll show you the lesson plan on the screen behind me. So the lesson plan is this. We're going to divide the session into 3 parts because I think pronunciation divides this way. The first part I'm going to call mazes. Mazes is an activity type which I really love for developing awareness. So it's all about the brain and thinking. So we often think of pronunciation as just being something physical and productive, but it also has an element of awareness. Mazes are activities for this kind of pronunciation point. The second element is maps. This is a type of activity which I find very useful for interactive pair works and group works, trying to get the meaning across, because after all, pronunciation, that's the point of it. The point about it is to understand and to be understood. It's about intelligibility. It's not about sounding like the Queen or somebody. It's about being understood. So that's what this type of activity is really good for. The third type, if I slide over here so you can see, the third type of activity is rhymes and raps, which are really good for remembering. They're motivating for one thing, but they're also good for remembering how things sound, making it stick in the mind, and for practicing, like practicing saying things. So that's the way that the talk is going to go. Before I begin I'll start with the mazes. Before I begin with that, I'd just like to tell you a little bit more about myself. I've been a teacher since the 1980s, so several decades. And my special interest in pronunciation came around in the 90s. I was teaching in Brazil at that time. Let me show you what I've done since then. In 1995, I wrote my first book, Pronunciation Games, with Cambridge University Press. Because they said to me, you've got some admin hours, and you write us some material for the school. That's what they said to me. So, and I didn't know anything about pronunciation at that time, but I said, okay, I'll give it a go. And little by little, I became super interested in that. And so I've gone on to write all of the other books that you can see behind me, including these on-pack books, which won the British Council Elton's Award a couple of years ago. So yes, I've had this interest in pronunciation for quite a long time, and I think I like it because it's hybrid. It crosses over lots of different things. It's got the physical element, but also we've got the mental element, and it's not like any other part of English language teaching because of that, because it's so multifaceted. It's really motivating, I think. I think you'll find that the pronunciation part of your lesson will end up being the part that your students look forward to the most. So hopefully at the end of this session, you'll have some activity types that you can take into class and adapt yourself for your own situation. I want to make sure that that's clear, that you don't just have to use my activities, you can adapt them to make it relevant for you. Let me start with an example of a maze type activity. Here's an example of a maze. And the idea is that the students have to find a path from the black stone to the other black stone, from fat to cat, they can only step on a stone if the word has that same vowel sound. So you can see that if you're starting at fat, you've got three options here. That you can go to the one with hate and the one with wash, or you can go to the one with man. Which one of these three has the same vowel sound as fat? Man, everyone's putting man, but someone's put hate. Okay, so most people are saying man. That's where I would go, actually, man. Hate, this is a different vowel sound. If I just say the sound by itself, A. So that's, okay, that's A, and that's A. A is the one we want. I can see that people are racing ahead here. You can't jump to hat. That means jumping across. There's no jumping in this game. You have to walk. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share this on a slide so you can see it more clearly. I think maybe that's a bit too small for you to see. Okay, so we got to man, and I want you to tell me where to go next. We got to man, which is the next one. Yes, gas. Oh, thank you, Yasmin. Thank you, Chandine. Gas, and then bag. Okay, bag. Let's go to bag. Yeah. Thank you, Emily. Bag, and then mad. Thank you, Sheila. Mad. Where next? Mad. Then we can go to hat and fan and rang. Yes, rang. Thank you, Fuong. After that, cash. Yes, cash. I'm not going to allow you to go to warm. No, warm is not the same sort of sound. Or warm. Cash, and then land, and then camp, and after camp, back. We can't jump, so you can't go to salt from there. You've got to walk. Can, yes, can, and hand, yes. Thank you. After hand, ant, and cat. Very good. Well done. Now, if you do this with your class, you can do it first. You ask them to find the path, maybe by themselves or in groups, and then go through the answers together. And finally, this is the part which is most important. You have to elicit or point out patterns in the spelling patterns like this, for example. Look at hate. Compare it with hat. Hat has this short vowel sound. Hate is a different vowel sound. And the only difference in spelling is this mysterious E at the end, sometimes called the magic E, because although you don't pronounce it, it changes the vowel before it. So that's an interesting spelling pattern that your students can learn. And you find the same thing with made, you've got the magic E. That's really interesting, I think, for your students to learn. What else can you notice in terms of spelling patterns? Well, look at this word here, for example, art. Art, the A is lengthened by the letter R, always changes the vowel before it. So if you take away the R, it's at, but with the R, art, the vowel is different, at, art. The R always has this effect. It changes the vowel before it. And then there's the same thing with salt. The L changes the vowel before it. So that's another interesting spelling pattern. You can see the same with call. The L changes the vowel before it. So that's how you work with this game. Incidentally, I should mention a point about accent. I'm from Manchester, and in my accent, I could go this way. Gas, grass, ask, past, laugh. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not illegal, thank God. But then I would have to go back because there's no way to continue after that. I return to gas. And you may find other places where different accents have different possibilities. But I tried to make the activity accent friendly, so it doesn't matter if you have a different accent. You should take the same path in the end. This type of activity, there are plenty more of them on this website here, if you want these spelling activities. I have actually put links to all of the activities in today's session in the chat box. So you'll find a link to that in the chat box if you want it. You can also use mazes for other things apart from just spelling. Look at this one. This maze, you've got to go from A to B if the verb has ES in the third person. So I talk, he talks. It doesn't have ES. Talk, talks, count, counts. But teach, teaches. You add an ES and it's a separate syllable. Teach, one syllable. Teaches, two syllables. That's the way you have to go through this maze. If the ES is an extra syllable, then you can go. So we're going to A to teach, teaches, and then washes. Washes, yes. After washes, you can't jump to presses because there's drink in the way. So we're going to go from washes to mixes to mixes, after mixes, switches. Yes, switches, thank you. And you can't jump all the way to finishes. I know you're maybe getting a bit impatient there. You've got to go little by little. Switch dresses, dresses, yes. And after dresses, kisses. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I'm following the path with my cursor. Kisses, pushes, catches, catches, and somebody mentioned presses earlier on, so we can have presses now. Presses, watches, and wishes, wishes, guesses, fixes, searches comes next, searches, and then finishes. Way, that takes us to the end. Your students may ask you, but teacher, how do I know when to add es on the end of the verb? Or plural, sometimes they're plurals as well. Kisses, for example. How do I know when to add es? And the answer? The simple answer is this. If it's too difficult to say it without, for example, let's look at the word kiss. Try to make the plural of kiss without an E. What are you going to get? You're going to get kiss. It's just too difficult to say. At least it is for me. There's too many S's altogether. That's how you know. If it's too difficult to say without the syllable, you add the extra syllable. And so if the verb ends with an S, but also if it ends with a ch, because ch is very similar to an S, or a x in the word mix. This ends with an S. Effectively, there's a hidden S, mix. So you can't say mix. So that's how you know when to add an extra. Maricel has a good suggestion. You could talk about spelling patterns. You've got CH, S, X, SH. So you could focus on the spelling patterns if you liked, if you want to make it a bit clearer for your students. But yes, Zam, it is difficult to memorize that list of spellings. So you could just do it by instinct. Is it too difficult to say? Then add an extra syllable. Well, the last maze I wanted to show you is basically do it yourself. You start off with an empty grid like this, and you've got to make a path from A to B. Let's say, for example, you want to focus on the sound W. So you've got, first of all, you make a list of words that contain the target, the W, and write them in a path from A to B: west, quick, tweet, swim, would, when, queen, once, twice, which, quarter, quit, woman, like that. You write those words in first. And then the rest of the squares which are empty, you put in words which don't have that sound. But if you want to be clever about it, put in words that appear to have it, but they don't really, like right. Right doesn't have a w. It looks like it's got one because of the spelling, but no, it's a trick. It's a silent W. So that's a distractor. So when you're filling in the empty ones, it's good to try and find words which look as if they are possible, but maybe they're not after all. So I do recommend that you make your own mazes and get your students to make mazes for each other as well. They enjoy doing that. So that's the end of part 1, which was mazes. Part 2, can you remember what that was? Mazes. The second one was maps. Thank you, Sumi. The second is maps. I'm going to introduce maps gradually. First of all, let's have a look at this situation in an office. Hey, Anna, got any paper? Sure, Jim. You want a piss? No, just some paper, please. Yes, a piece of paper. Paper, just one sheet. This is a misunderstanding caused by pronunciation. Minimal pairs, to be exact. You can see that Anna is saying piece, as in piece of paper. She's saying it in a way which sounds to Jim like piss, which is a rather embarrassing miscommunication here. And the same thing happens with shit, which is, she's trying to say sheet, but it sounds like shit. So there are two embarrassing confusions going on. And I use this, this picture just to show students that pronunciation matters. It makes a difference to the meaning. Sometimes students think pronunciation is simply a matter of sounding like a native speaker. That's not the point. The point is you've got to make a difference between certain sounds, even if those sounds are maybe the same in the student's first language. For example, the E of sheet and the I of shit. They're different sounds in English, but possibly in your student's first language, there may be no difference between those. And so the student thinks, it's not important, same thing. It's not the same thing. And that's what this picture is showing you. These are minimal pairs. Let's have a look at some minimal pairs. A chart of symbols, and I put some minimal pairs in there. You've got the sheep, ship, that's the red minimal pair here. There are other minimal pairs here that your students might find tricky. Right, light, what color is that? right light. Right light is the difference between r and l. So it's the purple one down here, right light. So that's another minimal pair. Maybe it's blue, I don't know. I can't see these colors very clearly anymore. You've got bet, bat, bet, bat. That's yellow, thank you. Yellow is easier to see there. Tree, three. That's a light blue. Tree, 3. Vest, west. That I'm going to say vest, west. Cot, court. That looks a little bit like orange to me. Orange. Cot, court. And then finally, ice, eyes. Ice, eyes. That one's the dark green there. So these are some examples of minimal pairs that your students might need to work on. Let me show you some examples, which I call maps of activities you can use to work on minimal pairs like these. In this one, you have to go to one of these exciting destinations along the top, right? According to the pronunciation. If I say this word, living, you have to go this way. If I say leaving, you go that way. So for example, if I say, I'm living with mum, left. And number 2, don't hit the plates. That's a left again. So it goes to number 3 here. The next one, don't sleep on the ice. That one is a right. Takes us to number 4 here. And can you feel it? Feel. That's another right. Takes us to Cairo. So this game works like this. You have to listen to me, the teacher. I say the sentences, and at the end, don't type in the number. Don't type the number. Just follow the path, and at the end, type the name of the city in the chat box. Okay. So number 1. I'm living with mum. Number 2. Don't hit the plates. Number 3. Don't slip on the ice. Number 4. Can you feel it? Are you going to Bangkok? Everybody's going to Bangkok. Someone's going to Cairo. Oh no, going to different place. Miami. I think my pronunciation needs to be improved. Or maybe it's both of our fault. It's a question of communication. It's nobody's fault. It's a cooperative game. Okay. What I would do next is maybe exaggerate the difference. Okay. If I say leaving, and maybe I would say it with my hands going like this, leaving. And living, maybe I could use a hand gesture like this, living. Maybe that could help to begin with. This activity, you can use this with any minimal pairs. You can use whichever minimal pairs you want. There's an empty one there with no sentences. Put any minimal pairs. Once you've done it once, then you can get a student from the class to say the sentences and the others follow. And after that, you could put the students in pairs or group works, and one student speaks and the others try to find the way. I really love it because it's a self-correcting exercise. If the students go to different cities, then they know that something's gone wrong, and then they have to work out what it was, and they have to try again until they get it right. So it sort of adapts to the students' capabilities. It's self-adapting. Yeah, Zahra says it's a good game for young learners. Yes, indeed. But it's also a good game for adults. It's a good game for anybody who needs it. I found this to be very popular. Students seem to enjoy it. So that's the first of the map activities, but I've got a couple more I also want to show you. This one, we have minimal pairs down the side, like played, prayed, alive, arrive, collect, correct. And then you've got minimal pairs along the top, light and right, rock, lock. Light, I've said that already. All right, fries and flies. So I'm going to say 2 words, and you have to say which place we went to. Okay, 2 words, 2 words. Here we go. Correct, flies. Correct, flies. Somebody's gone to the Philippines. No. Well, I was trying to go to Singapore. Some people have gone to Singapore. Thank God. Yeah, maybe I have to pronounce very, very carefully because these words are similar sounding, right? Correct, collect. They sound a little bit similar. So you have to, the activity obliges, it forces you to speak very clearly, and that's the point of it. And again, you do this first with you, the teacher, speaking, and then afterwards you can get students to speak and then put them into groups or pairs. And you can do this with any minimal pairs. What you have to do is write your minimal pairs down the vertical and then write some other minimal pairs along the horizontal, and you can use that with any minimal pairs you want. The third version of the map is a street map. This one is based on the and w. It's got like Vest Street and West Street. You can see it's a little bit complicated if your students have difficulty distinguishing those. You've got Vale Road, Whale Road, Wine Street, Vine Street. So I'm going to say a place to meet, one of these lovely, lovely cafes here. You can go to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, one of these places. And I'm going to say a sentence like this. Let's meet on the corner of Wine Street and West Street. That's Wine Street is here. And West Street is here. So on the corner of Wine Street and West Street is C. Wine Street and West Street. So that's how it works. Let me try it again, but this time without helping you. Hands off the cursor. Let's meet on the corner of Vest Street and Whale Road. F. Most people seem to be going to F, which is good because that's where I wanted to go. If you're going to one of the other ones, we might need to do a bit more work on the W and the. If you went to B, for example, I tried to say vest, best. Look at the lips. Vest, you can see the teeth. Vest, or west, you can't see the teeth. West, vest, west. So that's a similar game to the other ones. It's minimal, based on minimal pairs, easy to make your own versions of them. Here's an empty one. So you put one minimal pair in the horizontal and 2 minimal pairs in the vertical streets. The last one is another version of the street map, but I wanted to point out that it doesn't have to be strictly minimal pairs. Here you can see the horizontal streets have similar endings: Ritz, risk, ricks, and the verticals have similar endings: ducks, dusk, duck. So this is a version of the game which is similar to the other ones, but we're focusing on the endings of words. The reason being that in Southeast Asia generally, the consonants at the end of words, I think, is possibly the single biggest pronunciation problem. So you really need activities which are going to focus your students' attention on the endings of words. So that's the intention of this version of the game. Make sure that students pay attention to the endings of words. So that's the end of the maps activities. The last category of activities, let me see now, rhymes and raps. Yes, rhymes and raps. Here's an example of a rhyme. Whether the weather was good or whether the weather was bad, weather was better when we were together, whatever the weather we had. Here's something I love to do with rhymes like this. You can get half the class saying the numbers and the other half of the class have to say the rhyme, so that the bold word or syllable lands in the same moment as the number. Although I'd like to hear you say this, but obviously you're on muted, except Amy. Would you like to help, Amy? Or would you be willing to help by counting like this? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that. Okay, go ahead. So I'm just going to ask the class to imagine the numbers. I'll start them off. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whether the weather was good. 4. Or whether the weather was bad. 4. The weather was better when we were together, whatever the weather we had. 4. Yeah, I think you can imagine some numbers. And so you can do that in class with half the class saying the numbers and the other half of the class saying the rhyme, which is quite good fun. Obviously, this particular rhyme has a lot of w in it. If your students have any difficulty with that, then you might need to do some work on that. It also has a good focus on rhythm. You can see that the grammar words like the and was, they're relatively weak. They don't fall on the beat. So it helps to focus on the rhythm of the language a little bit as well. Yes, you might need to go quite slowly because it is a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it, Mohammed? Yes. The next example, I just wanted to show you that these rhymes and raps don't have to be complicated. I think you can write your own, and this is an example. It's just pieces of fruit with and, pears and peaches, figs and dates, oranges and kiwis, plums and grapes. So it's not rocket science, as we say. You can simply stitch together a few words, and if you repeat them, it becomes a rap all by itself. This particular one, as you can see, I focused a little bit on the pronunciation of the plurals, a different pronunciation of the plural endings, which is shown in green there. So here's how it's going to go. I'm going to say each line, and then you, everybody at home, repeat after me. So I'm going to trust you on this. because you're all muted, I won't be able to hear you. Yeah, I'm just going to have to trust you. But please go ahead and repeat after me, line by line. I'll try singing it, actually. Pears and peaches, figs and dates, oranges and kiwis, plums and grapes. Yes, I hope you joined in there. And so all of the people who you live with can hear how beautifully you are singing. But yeah, that's really easy to make raps and rhymes like that. Here's a kind of rap which is when you want to focus on those little words that we often don't pay any attention to, these grammar words, the pronunciation of grammar words. And this is difficult for students, especially when they're listening, because they haven't ever focused on them. Let me look at the second box here. The first box is really maybe too easy for you. The second box, you have to repeat after me each line. Okay? 1 isn't, 2 isn't, 3 isn't, 4. 1 wasn't, 2 wasn't, 3 wasn't, 4. 1 would be 2, it'd be 3, it'd be 4. 1 can be 2, can be 3, can be 4. 1 could be 2, could be 3, could be 4. 1 must be 2, must be 3, must be 4. The point about this is that the content words have just been replaced by numbers, so that your students' attention is not distracted by them. They're just totally predictable. Instead, they can focus all of their attention on the little words that go between and the way that they sound in connected speech. For example, 1 can be 2, can be 3, can be 4. Notice how the N sounds a lot like an M when it comes before a B. Your students, maybe they speak like a machine gun. Maybe they speak like this. 1 can be, 2 can be, 3 can be, 4, with every single syllable strongly pronounced. And that's certainly not the way that they're going to hear it when they're listening. It can make them difficult to understand as well. So the idea is to use this to focus on those little words that come between. You can easily make your own in the middle of a lesson, like this. Let's suppose you've noticed that your students are having difficulty with these little phrases here. Just put them between numbers. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. 1 of his, 2 of his, 3 of his, 4. Here you can see what it sounds like, the pronunciation. 1 will be 2, will be 3, will be 4. 1 has been 2, has been 3, has been 4. Notice the H in auxiliary verbs and pronouns is typically cut in normal connected speech. So you can focus on things like this. And strangely enough, students really enjoy this activity, simple as it appears. They find it funny. Okay, with that, I'll finish off with one rap. This one has quite a lot of fit, feet, sit, seat, minimal pairs in it, bit, beat. And it goes like this. You won't get fit just sitting on a seat. If you want to get fit, got to get up on your feet. Don't fill that seat, got to move a little bit. Get your feet to the beat, feel the heat. That's it. I'm going to say 2 lines, and then you repeat those 2 lines, please. Let's hear it. You won't get fit just sitting on a seat. If you want to get fit, got to get up on your feet. Don't fill that seat, got to move a little bit. Kick your feet to the beat, feel the heat. That's it. Thank you. I imagine a chorus of people all over the continent singing together. Your students may have some difficulties with little parts of it. The last two lines, for example, kick your feet to the beat, feel the heat, that's it. If your students have difficulties, you can actually slow it down and break it into smaller parts. For example, to the beat, to the beat, to the beat, to the beat, get your feet to the beat, get your feet to the beat. So you can work on small parts, slow it down, speed it up, get half the class doing 2 lines, the other half of the class doing the next 2 lines, etc. All of these variations. And after 10 minutes, they'll have it stuck in their head forever. It's very memorable. These things stick in the mind. So when they're walking home from school, they'll be doing it silent homework in their head. And that's where I would like to finish. So time for questions.
Thank you, Mark. I have a really good question relating to that last activity. Actually, one question is, how much sort of accuracy should the teacher focus on for that kind of rap and rhyme? So the students don't sound too, they said, a jumbled buzzing bee. So the students are not too like blah, 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 blah. How much sort of accuracy should the teacher?
You need sufficient accuracy to make the poem scan, by which I mean you need that rhythm to work. If the rhythm doesn't work, it's going to be a mess. So you need to get the stress. The stress is on the words where the beat falls. And if your students are not getting the rhythm correct, then it's not going to work as a poem. But they're going to know that. They will notice it instinctively. You don't necessarily need to police it too much. They're going to know. It's something you feel, isn't it? When you're chanting and singing, you can sense the rhythm.
I think a lot of teachers want to include this kind of like rap and rhyme in their class. They know it's interesting, but if it's maybe too big for the students, if they start off doing it and there's maybe too many lines, they could probably just cut it down. Yes,
well, first you've got to choose a rap which is appropriate to the level of the class. If that last one, for example, if the students don't know at least 70% of the words, probably more, they probably want to know more, 80% of the words. They want to know most of the words, really, before you start doing that. Don't use the rap as a way of teaching them vocabulary, because the focus is using the rap to focus on pronunciation. So don't choose a rap just because you like it, even though the students don't know the vocabulary. Choose one which is appropriate to the students. And if you can't find one, make one, like I did with the pears and peaches rap. Just words with and.
Okay, good. Yeah, always trying to link it to your lesson. Don't go off on a tangent just because you think it's a fun activity to do. Try and always keep it connected.
Mm-hmm.
What one of the sort of main questions is, one teacher has asked, what are the benefits of these activities for her students?
Well, there are 3 types of activities. There was mazes, maps, rhymes and raps, and the benefits of each of those are different. The benefits of the mazes, the maze type activities, is awareness raising. For example, of different spelling patterns in English and the way that the spelling corresponds to pronunciation. It's about knowledge. The second one, the maps type of activity, is for students to practice their pronunciation in a way where they have to understand and be understood. It's about activating their communicative skill and demonstrating the relationship between pronunciation and communication. That's really important. for them to understand that that's the point of pronunciation is communication. And then the rhymes and the raps, I think that the benefits there are twofold. The first is when they produce them, when they say them, they're getting exercise of the articulation. But possibly more important is the receptive part. When they are hearing it, it's making a kind of recording in their mind of the way that the language sounds, and something that they can remember, a memorable recording. And that's the way that the mind works. It's like a tape recorder. It records everything it hears, and then you can refer back to that later. So pronunciation has a receptive aspect to it too. That listening is really important, and I would relate rhymes and raps especially to that.
That's really good advice. I hope that teacher got that advice from that answer. One of the questions, and some of the teachers are asking about how much you should do in each lesson, like how many sounds you should focus on, and also how much time you should spend on these kind of activities.
Well, the last rap, for example, you won't get fit just sitting on a seat. That activity will probably take 10 minutes or 15 at the end of a lesson. It's really good to have it at the end of a lesson, I find. As I did today in this lesson I'm giving to you, I put it at the end because it puts a kind of feel-good factor at the end of a lesson, but it also means that your students leave the room with it going round in their head for the special extra, the homework that they don't even know they're doing. So 10 or 15 minutes like that. It depends really on the point that you're trying to get across. If it's just a single minimal pair, then you might spend 10 minutes, but you sometimes might want to look at a bigger feature. For example, you might want to focus on all of the short vowels, 6 short vowels in one class, and that may take a bit longer. So it depends how big the pronunciation focuses, but it will take, you should allow at least 10 minutes, I should think. And something else, if you don't mind me saying, you should bring in pronunciation to every part of your class. If you're teaching some new vocabulary, spend some time focusing on the pronunciation of those new words on their own and in sentences. If you're teaching some new grammar, similarly. For example, maybe in your course book, it has an example sentence for the present perfect. Have you ever been to Paris? It might be an example sentence. Then instead of just reading it, why not focus on drilling it, the way and the rhythm of it? So bring in pronunciation to all parts of your class, because it brings the language alive. That's why I like it so much. It animates the language and it animates your class.
It does indeed. Also, someone suggesting like doing breathing and like facial warm-ups as well, like in your class, I think is also a good idea for any kind of speaking practice. So the teacher can prepare, and that when they're preparing their vocabulary, maybe they should be preparing like what the pronunciation is going to be like for those words, so they can include that in their lesson plan. And like you said, about 10 minutes maybe to try and include an activity, so they can include that in their lesson plan. But what if they're doing an activity where there's a word that comes up and the students are asking them about the pronunciation and the teacher is not sure about that pronunciation? What kind of advice can you give for that?
Yes, the first thing to say is that you should never be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to admit it. You're not supposed to know everything. So you could say to your students, well, I'm not sure about that. Let's see if we can find out. And then you can use some resource that you may have available to you to find out either in that class or maybe ready for the next class. And treat it as a collaborative thing. Let's see if we can work it out together. Treat it that way. It's an adventure where everybody's a participant, the teacher included. The teacher isn't above everybody else. The teacher is one in the group. If you make that atmosphere prevalent in your class from the beginning, then you will never have a problem about having to admit that you don't know ever again. It'll be a part of the learning process. Sorry, I don't know. Let's find out, shall we?
Yeah, of course, there's one of the teachers, Jessie Jane, was saying that her teachers, now adults, find it very funny to practice the f sound and sticking their tongues out. Is there any advice you can give for that? But I think, like you said, that admitting that the teacher doesn't know everything and also being part of that learning process.
Well, when you asked that question, I could see your tongue sticking out, Amy. So that's the funny thing about that particular sound. You can actually see it, which means it's relatively easy to focus on. However, maybe it doesn't matter as much as you think it does, because if you consider that many native speakers of English don't use that sound either. People say free with an F sound instead of three. That's common in London, for example. Or in Ireland, they might say something sounding like tree instead of three. So the point is that if a large number of native speakers of the language say it this way, and they live their whole lives being understood, why do we force our students to do something that native speakers don't even do? That there is something to be said about choosing your battles wisely. Teach things that they really need in order to be understood.
I think that's very true. There's one comment saying that if the teacher doesn't know the answer, Juan has said that he just tells the student, that's your assignment, that's your homework to go and find out the answer, and then hopefully the student will go and find out the answer.
Yes, I hope they don't go home thinking, this teacher knows nothing. I mean, it's best to admit it if you don't know, I think.
Absolutely. Now, one of the final questions really is about giving feedback, which I think is actually a really important question. Giving feedback of how much feedback you can give to the students when you're doing these kind of pronunciation activities.
It's an interesting point, because it's widely recognized nowadays that English is a global lingua franca. And so a wide range of accents is the norm. It's normal. It's not. It's to be expected. Everybody will have their own accent, and your students and you yourself will probably have traces of your first language recognizable in your English, and that's no problem. So I think the best thing about when it comes to feedback is to try and be a bit more democratic, if I might put it that way, about it. You can say, well, I say it this way. Some people say it that way. I think if you say it the way you're saying it, people will not understand you. So maybe try to say it more like this or like that. In other words, you're trying to demonstrate to your students that this is about intelligibility. It's not about sounding like a native speaker. That's not really the point. And so when it comes to giving feedback, try to avoid crushing your students with some sort of norm from above. No, we say it like this. Rather than dominating them, try to make it more, well, I say it this way. I think maybe you wouldn't be understood if you say it like that. So maybe try this.
Yeah, I think like you said, like keeping it very focused to what's happening in the class and not being too, too dominant about one particular thing. If you can understand your student, then that is the main point.